All right. Good afternoon, Gwinnett County. So we are live. Before we jump into why we're here, just a few quick announcements to make about some upcoming events that we have. So on May 28th at 7 p.m., we will have our Civic Education Forum on Public Service Commissioner. So if you're curious about, the Public Service Commissioner, what it's about, how it impacts your day to day in terms of the people that are going to be running, not only in the primary, but in the fall for this role, then that definitely is an event you want to tune in. We'll be streaming right here live on our Facebook page, YouTube page, and on Twitter with our civic education forum, where we're going to be educating you about the Public Service Commissioner. So please, when that forum is live at 7 p.m., please submit your questions in the chat. And that's on Wednesday, May 28th at 7 o'clock. Ms. Patsy Duran will be our special guest that'll do a presentation on the role of that position. And we'll have some questions that our branch will have for her to break down in terms of the role. And then we'll take questions from our audience if you all have any questions about that. Also, keep in mind, we do have on June the 12th will be our general meeting at 7 p.m. at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Building. At that particular meeting, a little bit different. We're going to honor and have an award ceremony for all of our participants in our local AXO competition, as well as announce some of our medal winners. We do have someone going to the Nationals to represent our county and represent our branch, specifically in Gwinnett County. And so we'll announce that person. I'll keep their name under wraps until we make the announcement publicly at the event, where we can celebrate her and her accomplishment and all of those participants that participated. We do have one more day of competitions, which those candidates will participate in. And maybe we'll get another medal winner or two out of that. We'll see. But we'll make all those announcements of who all our medal winners are on June 12th at 7 o'clock. That'll be our regular general meeting at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Building. Finally, early voting starts for Public Service Commissioner on May 27th through June 13th. So typically the early voting times are, if you're in Gwinnett County, it's from 7 to 7. But again, go to mvp.sos.ga.gov. Again, mvp.sos.ga.gov to get your sample ballot and take a look at, who's running. Finally, on the first Tuesday in June, which is the 3rd, we will have our the Democratic primary District 3 candidate forum on Public Service Commissioner. So there are like 4 people running for Public Service Commissioner in District 3. So we're going to have a candidate forum. So the week before, we'll educate you on the role of the Public Service Commissioner. Once you have a well-rounded understanding on what Public Service Commissioner does, now you can listen to the candidates and listen to what they're going to talk about in terms of what they will do if they, win the primary and then eventually if they go on to win the general election. And to represent the District 3 as the candidate. So first, we're going to educate you on what the role is, and then you'll get a chance to then see which candidates fit within the framework of what you care about as a voter when they run for that position. So definitely be on the lookout for that. All right, so I think I've covered all of our announcements. I guess the final announcement I will make is our Freedom Fund banquet will take place on September the 20th, Saturday. So those tickets will go on sale officially on tomorrow. So definitely get your tickets for our Freedom Fund banquet. And then also, I'm going to put up a link for donations for our AXO. As I spoke about earlier, we do got some medal winners that will be representing us at the Nationals for AXO. So you can use the link below to donate to our AXO winners. Again, all proceeds will go towards, funding them, paying for their hotel stay, gas stipend, and all of that while they're down there. Any equipment or material we need to get them to, so they can put together their best foot forward when they participate in the AXO competition. All right, so now that the announcements are out of the way, let's jump into why we're here. So first, we want to start with a quick recap on how we got here. Yesterday, WSBTV released a video report on us requesting the Gwinnett County Gwinnett County Public Schools. Specifically, that request was made to the school board or Board of Education to release the executive session meeting minutes from January 27th and January 31st, because we felt like both executive session meetings violated the Opens Meetings Act. We did another video that you can go watch on our Facebook page. There's a full-length video of us covering the area board meetings, and then there's a 5-minute video where one of the board members, Rachel Stone, mentioned that the Opens Meetings Act prevents her from being able to talk about why the superintendent was terminated. So after some thorough research, we checked into it, and we found out that actually the Open Meetings Act does allow her to speak on the issue, and those closed door meetings they had to have discussion about terminating his contract should have been open to the public to hear any arguments or any concerns or whatever deliberation they may have had about removing him as superintendent. That should have been done in a public, open public meeting. It shouldn't have been done behind closed doors. I think our position on this from day one, if you go all the way back and look through old archives of videos where I was ranting and that went viral, or statements that our organization has made, it's all been about accountability and transparency. From day one, when this went down on January 27th, and myself, along with other partners of our organization, the NAACP, Divine Nine organization, showed up to the first meeting that was held at 5 p.m. on Monday, January 27th. Our position then was, what's going on? Be open with us. Tell us what the issues are. And then, of course, they scheduled an emergency meeting on that Friday, January 31st, on the eve of Black History Month, to remove the superintendent. That was the 10 a.m. meeting. So, our position has been pretty consistent. We felt like at the time that, the public should have been able to hear why this was happening, get some answers on why this was happening. And we didn't get that. Now, at the time, we wasn't aware of what laws, governed that or regulated that. That was something, like I said, once one of the board members, I mentioned it again during the area board meeting back in April. I went in, myself personally went and researched that law and then cross-referenced it with our education chair, John Cox, and then cross-referenced it with some legal people within our organization, just to make sure that we're interpreting what we're reading correctly. At the time, we released a public statement on Monday that we sent to the school board as well as to the interim superintendent, asking for those records to be released from both executive sessions, since we feel like both of them was invalid, since both were to discuss the contract status and possible termination of the superintendent, which eventually did happen at the Friday, January 31st meeting. They declined. They sent us a redacted executive session minutes where we can't see anything, but they voted to go into executive session, which we felt like was an insult. So we made a second request and replied back to their reasoning why they said that they are unable to release the records, which had to do with the board, firing the superintendent for convenience. And I did explain to one of their personnel people that, hey, there's nothing in the Open Meetings Act that says, hey, if it's for convenience, y'all don't have to talk about it publicly, or y'all can hide behind a closed session meeting. There's nothing in there like that. So at this time, our organization has moved forward with filing a complaint with the Attorney General's office. So at this time, the Attorney General office does have our complaint, and we're going to turn it over to them to investigate the matter. And so that was done today after we got confirmation a second time that they would not be honoring our request. Now, at this time, what I want to like to take the time to do now, and I'm going to bring in our education chair, but before we get into a discussion about transparency and accountability, I kind of want to put voters at ease on, because I know there's going to be some concerns with, is this more money that the district is going to have to dish out because of this complaint is being filed? And the answer to that is no. According to the law, the only people who's going to be liable for any infractions or violations of this law is the members on the board. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly to go over those infractions. So let me just do that quickly here. Share screen. And John, you let me know if you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay. So here's the code 50-18-74. Say any person or entity knowingly or willfully violating the provisions of this article by failing or refusing to provide access to records not subject to the exemption from this article, by knowingly or willingly failing or refusing to provide access to such records within the time limit set forth in this article, or knowingly and willingly frustrating or attempting to frustrate the access to the records by intentionally making the records difficult to obtain or review, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be punished by a fine not to exceed $1,000 for the first violation. Alternatively, a civil penalty may be imposed by the court in any civil action brought pursuant to this article against any person who negligently violates the terms of this article in the amount not to exceed $1,000 for the first violation. A civil penalty or criminal fine not to exceed $2,500 per violation may be imposed for each additional violation that the violator commits within a 12-month period from the date the first penalty or fine was imposed. So I'm going to pause right there. So pretty much, and let me stop sharing. What does that mean? That basically means each board member can be fined $1,000 for the first violation and an additional $2,500 for each violation that occurs after that within a 12-month period. So basically what that means is, by our count, they're at a minimum of at least 3 violations. First violation occurred when the January 27th meeting happened, and there was discussion about his termination, and there was no open meeting for the public to hear or listen to about the discussion of his termination. Although the letter or email or whatever was posted on the GCPS site, Gwinnett County Public Schools site, said the meeting was about his contract. Okay.
Special call meeting.
Yeah, special call meeting. The January 31st meeting would have been the second violation, another special call meeting to discuss termination of his contract. And the final and third violation would have been the actual them removing him as the superintendent without having an open meeting with the public to discuss any facts, any personnel issues, whatever the matter is. And again, I want to be clear. Their defense is that, it was because, he was removed without cause. Well, the law doesn't get into the weeds of cause, not cause. That doesn't make a difference. They could have said, hey, we're getting rid of him because we don't like the fact that he chews bubble gum, and we don't like how he chew it. And so we want to get rid of him. Again, the law does allow the board to terminate a superintendent without any specific reason, right? They don't have to been to broke any laws. They don't have to been to underperform. If the board makes a decision they want to move on, they got the right to do that. What they don't have the right to do is do that without the public being able to listen in on why they're doing that, or to listen in to their rationale for doing that. That's where we're stepping in and saying this is where they violated the law. Now,
they don't get to do it without giving a reason to the public. making their reasoning public.
Correct. Right. You don't get to hide in a closed door session. And so now we kind of, into the weeds a little bit now, and we're into the portion where I want to have a conversation about transparency and accountability. For us, and for me personally, transparency and accountability is not something when you're an elected official, you get to pick and choose when you want to be transparent. I hear a lot of the board members say that they're very transparent and they're about accountability. Yet, it's like James Baldwin once said, I can't believe what you say when I see what you do. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't turn transparency and accountability on and off like a light switch. You want to be transparent and accountable when it's things that you feel like may not offend the public, but when it's something that you feel like the public may be against that decision, you want to do it in a closed door session and not be transparent and accountable about it. And so I think, at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about. The Gwinnett NAACP is going to hold any elected official, regardless of race, creed, color, political party affiliation. None of that matters to us. We expect all elected officials that the voters elect in office to be transparent and accountable for the actions they take, especially in a situation where it's costing voters $750,000.
Let's add that, we also want to make sure that the voters have the information they need to make the decisions that they need to. So if you're telling them one thing and doing another, then they're not going to be adequately informed about what decisions they need to make when it comes to whether or not you're working for them or against them, because you say one thing and then you do another, and a lot of times people are working, have other things to do. They're not into the weeds, but we're paying attention because that's what we're required to do by our bylaws.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, this is why you all join our organization. This is why you all follow us on social media, because we know everybody does not have time to pay attention to every work session, every board, go to every school board meeting. But again, you come to organizations like ours because you can trust that we're going to give you the right information. And we want to definitely be that resource for you to get the right information and to get educated about these issues. We welcome members of our organization coming to our committee meetings and having discussions and debate about issues and things that are happening in the community. But again, to bring it back even to this particular subject, or to tie everything into this particular subject, this is about accountability and transparency. I'm not talking about saying it. I'm talking about living it and doing it. Because if you're living it and doing it, you don't have to keep telling me that's what you're about. Otherwise, I feel like you're trying to sell me on the fact that that's what you are. Either you're trying to make me believe it or you're trying to convince yourself, because you don't have to say it, just do it. And right now, according to our interpretation of the Opens Meetings Act, according to the work that people, myself and people within the organization have done, the education chair, our legal redress chair, other people in our organization that has an attorney background, we interpret this law that the board is in violation of the law when they call two closed door session meetings. And those executive session meetings need to be released to the public. Yeah. And my thing is, what is there to hide? The public deserve a right to know what was discussed in those executive sessions when you made a decision to put the voters on the hook for $750,000.
Yeah, pardon me, Ed. But you've been, a number of them in their recent town halls have said, I would love to tell you, but we can't. One even said, I'm getting in trouble because I'm saying too much, and so this law allows you to speak. So if you were saying, I would love to tell you, but I'm restricted, well, we're telling you now that you're not restricted, and now you don't want to speak. So for me, the issue is becoming, okay, you said this. Okay, let's go with that. Let's say that was your intention and this is what you were trying to do. Okay, let's go with that. But now it just continues to switch. So now it's just starting to look like hypocrisy. And you can't really give legitimacy to hypocrisy. If someone tells you, my intention is to be totally transparent, I'm going to have multiple meetings so that everybody knows exactly what's going on. And then when we present you with, oh, hey, look, you've been saying that you want to tell, but you can't because of the law. Well, the law actually says there's an exception for this particular case because he's a public official. You can actually speak freely. And then all of a sudden, hey, man, so by the way, send us those executive session meetings so that we can see what it is that you were talking about that day that you refused to disclose. And then this is what you said. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Yeah, we can see it. A blank, a redacted.
So that's what you said. So, and here's how disingenuous this particular piece of paper is, right? Because we sat, many of you were there that first night. This is from that first night. We sat there for about an hour while they deliberated.
That looks like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours.
That looks like an hour worth of conversation is Black Park. That looks like an hour versus conversation. So even that doesn't make sense to us. So if you're not being transparent with the decision you made there, and maybe it was based more on emotion, then that's informing us of your the way that you do things. So when it comes to this, your firm thing, selecting a firm, then it looks the same way to us. You're choosing a firm out of emotion that doesn't correspond to the data. When you say we're all about the data, this firm only had 20 searches in their career for a superintendent. The other two qualified companies, one had over 800, the other one had over 1,000. And this company is more expensive, but you're saying you're supposed to be fiscally responsible. So like I said, these things are not meshing, and it doesn't look good. And then you don't answer questions when it comes to, hey, why doesn't this look good? Why is this different from what you said? So we're actually hoping that you'll just be transparent, like you said, and stand on whatever it is that made you make those decisions, and then tell us concretely why you chose this inexperienced firm over two other firms. You're getting some pushback from some of your board members, and I hope more of the board members start speaking instead of staying quiet.
I would recommend any board member, because by my count, based on the at least the minimum violation that I'm counting, that's $6,000 out your personal pocket that every board member is gonna have to pay for what they did. $1,000 for not having a closed door meeting about the superintendent's termination on January 27th, $2,500 for the Friday meeting, and the third infraction for actually removing him without having an open meeting with the public. So that's 3 infractions, 1,000, 25, 25, that's $6,000 per board member. That's not coming out the taxpayer. All them area board meetings that I sat there and listened to and actually went to, where the community was saying, hey, the board, y'all need to get back some money. Well, they finna get back some money if they found in violation of this Open Meetings Act. That's gonna come out of their pocket. So I'm saying right now it's up to about $6,000. And if they're gonna also count us asking for those records and them declining us as additional violation, my advice to some of them board members that don't agree with other board members that don't want to give up the executive session meeting minutes and don't want to make a public statement about why the superintendent was removed, my advice to you is I would probably text or send a group email saying, hey, I think we should get these records up, and be one of those board members that want to be transparent about this process and say, hey, I think we should turn over to NAACP the executive session minutes from the dates that they requested. And we should also, because this was another request we asked, post them on our website for the public to go in and review those executive session meeting minutes. Because based on what the NAACP sent us, we feel like we in violation. So we're going to, unless our legal team or unless somebody else tells us we need to take it down, we're going to at least put it out there, because based on what they sent us, looks like we in violation of the law. So I'm just telling it, just personal advice, because again, each board member is on the hook for that money per board member. It ain't y'all split this $6,000. No, it's $6,000 fine, up to at least a $6,000 fine per person. And again, I don't even know if the courts or the attorney general are going to factor in, hey, what the NAACP asked for, they presented evidence that you was in violation, you decline them. So that's going to be an additional infraction every time when they ask for it, you decline them. I don't know how that particular part of the process will work. But
And
all I'm
there's a
saying
criminal
is,
component.
all I'm saying is, if I'm one of the board members that don't want to keep getting fined and having to pay money out of my pocket for being in violation for this, I probably would send some type of group text or email. So if it becomes under an investigation by the Attorney General, because we did send a complaint to them to investigate this, I would say, hey, I was one of the board members that was willing to be open and transparent about this. The rest of the board disagrees, but here's my email. So you can keep my violations at a minimum, because again, this is going to come out of their personal pocket. The school district is not on the hook for these violations. These are the individual board members that are on the hook. And I don't even think they're probably even aware that they're on the hook for these violations. But I mean, hello, you watch this video, now you know you're on the hook for these violations.
Like I said, there's a
if it's determined that you violated the Open Meetings Act, and by everything we read through the letter of the law, we feel like you are.
Yeah,
and so I guess we can go ahead, John. Sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. I want to make sure that it's clear. There's a criminal component as well, and that's up to the AG's office. So that criminal component could be a misdemeanor. Especially if it looks like you intentionally doing what you were doing, and you intentionally tried to not comply, and so forth and so on. And this is not something that's just confined to us. I'm assuming that at some point they'll need to make an example. So anyway, that's just so that it's out there, because it seems like sometimes people read these statutes and then stop where they want to stop. Because had they continued reading the paragraph below, they would have found that this is not something they should have done. So
absolutely not. And I'm gonna give a few closing remarks as we get ready to wrap this thing up. Only thing I'm gonna say is, as the young people say, stand on business. Open Meeting Act say you can talk about it, so talk about it. But be careful, because you said you fired them with cause. And in my opinion, you open yourself up for defamation, because every time y'all keep saying you fired them without any particular reason or without cause, you give reasons why you fired them. So I don't know which side. Like I said, all of this is confusing to the public, which is why you need to be crystal clear about what's going on. But as the young people say, stand on business. If you say, hey, we fired him, we the school board, we had the ability to fire him without a reason, and that's what we did. We didn't like him, so we fired him. Say it with your whole chest. Don't be scared. Say why you did what you did, and let the public know, and the public can make a decision when it's time for elections in 2026 and elections in 2028. The public can make a decision whether they want to move on for this board, or the public can make a decision whether they want to recall last year's elections. It's up to the public. All of that, in my opinion, should be on the table and up for discussion. But either way, all we're saying is stop trying to hide behind the law that you say prevents you from talking, that you say allowed you to have these closed door meetings, and it pretty much says, nah, not when you're talking about terminating a public officer. So that's it for me.
It erodes public confidence in your ability to make these choices transparently and for the good of the people, when it seems like you keep making choices for personal reasons. And as a part of some agenda that has nothing to do with the data displays. And that's it for me.
Or and I'll piggyback off of that, or it doesn't seem like you're serving for the betterment of the school. I mean, I don't understand in a time where, federal dollars are being taken out of the school system, or at least attempting to be taken out of the school system by this current administration. It makes sense to blow $750,000 on removing the superintendent, and then you ain't even, got the guts to do it and be upfront with the public about why you're doing it. You want to hide behind some law that pretty much says the opposite of what you're saying. And then you double down and you hire a search firm that you pay $25,000 more to use, at least according to one of the board members, Gasper said at the board meeting. That's his words, not mine. And they the least experienced. Like I said, there's a lot of things that ain't making sense with what we're seeing with Gwinnett County School Board right now, which is why we're doing what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and we'll await the Attorney General's investigation. Any closing remarks from you, John?
No, I have a lot of things I could say. I won't say, just in case there's any potential litigation. What I would say is that please, going forward, clean up your facts. Some of this stuff that you're putting out is not only misleading, but it seems to be intentionally misleading. And I'm just someone who observes this stuff regularly. But for somebody who's supposed to be on the inside and very well versed, the mistake seems intentional. The misrepresentation of the facts seems intentional. So we'll see how it goes. I'd be ready to stand as a subject matter expert and debate those alternative facts that have been put out and see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, that's all from us. We thank y'all for joining us again. Please tune in to our Civic Education Forum on Public Service Commissioner next week. Please get ready to start, getting ready to go vote on May 27th. Go to mvp.sos.ga.gov. Like I said, tune in on May 28th to watch our, get educated about the Public Service Commissioner. And the following week, we will have a candidate forum with District 3 Democratic candidates for Public Service Commissioner. And then look for some future civic education forum on city council, on mayor. We're going to try to educate you all as much as possible about these roles. And we'll do one on school board again. We'll definitely do one on the school board and what's the role of the school board and whether separation of duties come between the board and the superintendent. That'll be in the future. Going into 2026 when there's a new election.
Y'all have to make sure their opinion is heard on that committee, the committee that the board is.
Oh, yeah. Talk about that a little bit, John, before we close out.
So the board is trying to put together a committee to help them determine what policies should be. That's generally something that the board should do itself. However, they want to put together a committee, and they have their stuff online about, how they want to do it. It's very vague. There's a lot of openings. We responded with our suggestions as to how to make sure that it's not something that's usurped by special interests or people with their own political agenda, and how we make sure that the people who sit on this committee that advises them on what policy should be are actually the people that the public would want on that committee, and that they're represented, well across the district. Some underserved schools, some economically disadvantaged schools, or representation should be there, because the way the budgeting works, that's another issue too. They're going forward with this budget without a superintendent. That also, never mind. I'm going to let it go.
Go ahead. But all right. So that being said, again, a lot of decisions being made. It's not adding up. I don't get the subcommittee. I mean, I heard the arguments at the last board meeting. The subcommittee was created, as a way to have public input. Well, to me, if you want public input, get a suggestion box. Have a town hall. To me, to advocate your duties as a board member to a subcommittee that doesn't have the training or legal expertise to come up with policy making for the school board. And and then again, how you gonna hire a new superintendent when you already bringing in people that he probably forgot more stuff about than the people that's going to serve on this subcommittee? He or she probably forgot more stuff about.
Let me just add this one point. Even picking the person with the to run this committee is the person with the least experience. So this is not an undertaking that you want to take that requires some expertise, at least in content mastery, to be able to make sure that the people that you bring together understand all the facts and everything that goes along with the district and all the nuances in the district and so forth and so on. You put the chair of that committee, the person with the least amount of experience, so they have the least amount of weight to push back on the community. So we hope that there'll be some subject matter experts in there and legal in the room as well. But also we want to make sure that those meetings are always open to the public. And so, I'm sorry, Ed.
No, you did good. That was great. So again, a lot of stuff happening don't make sense. Again, I don't get creating a subcommittee before you've hired, a superintendent. into the position and get their thought process on whether that's something that's going to be something they're okay with. Again, how many superintendents may shy away from this job because they're going to get policies created by people that are not subject matter experts in this, or they're supposed to be quote unquote subject matter experts, but they're not getting any training to be subject matter experts in this. Again, to me, if you want public input, if that was the at least that's what I heard was in the last board meeting, that was the reason that a subcommittee was created to make policies. Again, the voters elected you to do that, not advocate your duties of policy making to somebody that's not getting the training. Like I said, the election is in 2026 and 2028. We may put our survey back out there. We never got the 1,000 voters that we wanted to pursue doing a recall election of the board. But depending on how this Open Meetings Act, situation goes, we may put it out there to see if people really got the appetite to move forward with recalling the election and electing a new board. Just food for thought. Like I said, we filed it with the AG's office, our complaint that they violated the Open Meetings Act with the January 27th and January 31st executive session meetings, because those meetings was to discuss the removal of the superintendent. And we'll wait for the Attorney General's response. So that being said, thank y'all for joining us during your lunch break. For those who may join later to watch, thank you for watching, and y'all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Mm-hmm.